I'm very excited about this. So in case you don't know, my name is Alex. I work here at KISS FM. And Katie here, Katie Williams, is my coworker.
Yes.
And she also works here at iHeart LA. And a couple weeks ago, Katie reached out to me, just going to do a brief background. Katie reached out to me and had, I guess, noticed that I had been speaking about mental health awareness on social media. And Katie found me at work and shared a little bit about her story with me. And we decided that we wanted to do this. And because it's Mental Health Awareness Month, just sit down and have a discussion about mental health and to share your story. So how about you just first introduce yourself? I know I gave you a little intro,
Yes.
but why don't you tell everybody what your name is, how long you've been working here, all of that.
We'll do all that. So yeah, my name is Katie Williams. I started here at iHeart 10 years ago. And yeah, I had noticed, that everything you'd been sharing online just about mental health and mental health awareness. And I feel that awareness is increasing on the whole, but I just love that you were so open about it. So yeah, I just wanted to share what I've been up to, and my story relating to that is just when I was in high school, my 17-year-old brother took his life, and he used to say things like, well, I'll kill myself, and he'd be upset, and so I never took him seriously. And so when it came to time to share my story, I basically just started writing a journal, and I swore I'd never show anybody because it's just my private journal. And after 3.5 years of just turning just to that notebook, some friends said, well, why don't you publish it? I think you could help people. So I ended up publishing it and sharing my story with this book. Yes. It's called Journey of the Heart. And what ended up happening is the more I would share, the more feedback I'd get that it would help other people. So I wanted to put it out there for anyone who's already been impacted by suicide, but I think even greater than that, even more than that, my hope is not only to just be a companion piece and a journal, my journal, to just companion someone who's been through it, but also share the warning signs so another family doesn't have to go through it.
First, I think even before we get into this more, I know this is something obviously that you talk about a lot, but I never want it to go unnoticed that this is something that I'm so thankful that you have been brave enough to not only to put the amount of emotions that are in this book and the amount of things that you're processing are so heavy, but the fact that you then published it, that had to be kind of scary to do. And I can't imagine how emotional it was too. So I really want to thank you for doing that. And I say it all the time, but I think the more we talk about this, the better it will be to remove stigmas, to raise awareness, and this is a huge thing. What was it like? When did you start journaling after going through that? How long had it been?
So it was exactly on the 1-year anniversary the next day. So on the 1 year, a lot of people came over to the house, and it was just packed. It was his friends, it was our family friends, it was people from just you name it across the board in our lives. So the house was just flooded with people and flowers and all of that. And the very next day after that 1-year anniversary, I thought, okay, I think it's time. There was just something in me that it was time to get some things out. Because I think you don't really know who to talk to or who. Of course, I talked to my close friends, but I just felt I'd always journaled a lot, and that made sense to me. So I just picked up an old journal that I gotten for Christmas from my parents. And so the day after the 1 year, when the house was quiet, I thought, okay, now it's time. And I started writing, and 3 pages just flooded out of my pen very easily. And I thought, okay, this is maybe gonna stick for a while. So it all started then.
How old were you?
I was 16 when he died, and then 17 when I began writing.
So looking back now, as you look through the things that you process through journaling, because I think journaling, that's something that I do just for my anxiety. I think it's such a good way to process things and to get, even if no one reads it or you're not talking about it, it's so good to, I think, sometimes just get pen to paper and then see it and see and then also go back and see the progress that you've made too. Looking back now, and again, now that you have this book and people are reading it, it has to be interesting to see the progress that you've made through the pages.
Yeah, I think day one, for some reason, whenever I kind of go back to it, because sometimes I'll flip through and just kind of just read different parts of it and just kind of revisit it, I tend to find myself going to the very beginning just to remember that 17-year-old girl who started writing, and to remember that back then I thought it was almost impossible. Like, I had no idea how I was going to get through it because I lost my brother, who was also my friend. So it felt like this mixed bundle of just anger toward him, because I felt like he took two people. He took my brother and my friend, the same guy. But yeah, I think the very beginning, it helps me just see, you know, how much time has passed. And then honestly realizing just gratitude for the community in our life at the time, whether it was from school, church, karate, family, friends, just like everything we were involved in, I felt like people just really came close. And so it really increased just my gratitude for all the people in my life, many who are still in my life, you know. And my brothers, all of our ages were 16, 13, and 9, so my two younger brothers. So we each kind of had people just enter our life. So it helps to see, look how far we've come, and that's my hope for others, is it might seem impossible right now, but you're going to make it. Whether it's someone who's struggling with mental health or someone who's been impacted by suicide, just knowing that there are so many people around you that can relate, but it's a matter of just extending your hand.
Yeah. When you were processing all this, and that's such a... I can't imagine processing it, and then let alone processing what happened, and then also trying to give back and to raise awareness. At what point did that transition happen where you felt like you're like, okay, I've done a lot of work on myself and I've processed this, now I need to put this to action? When did that happen for you?
Well, I think it took years, for sure. Yeah, it took years. I would say something, and everybody's different, but I'll say sometime around the 10-year mark, things started to feel different. I think there's a lot of milestones along the way, and then you start recognizing when people know you've lost someone to suicide, they start approaching you. For example, hey, I have a friend who took their life. How do I help their family? Or what do I say? Or what do I... So I think I always had people reaching out for that. But within the last year, there's just been so many suicides, whether celebrity or not. And I just felt, because it's on the rise, I just felt so strong in my gut that that's not okay. It's not okay. I don't want any other families to have to go through this. So I think that motivation is stronger for me now, at least, than the loss. I'll always miss my brother Gabe. I'll always have moments that are stronger than others. But now, looking back, it's been almost 19 years. I think so much healing has happened, not only in me, but in my family as a whole, as a unit, that all I want to do is share. I'll tell the rideshare driver, I'll tell someone on the street, I'll tell anyone, because I just want them to know you can reach out and get help, because it's too late for my family, but it's not too late for someone else. And I couldn't have done this if it were even probably 5 years ago. What I've seen in changing in our culture and more suicides just made me even more just fired up about it.
When you're talking to people about mental health, whether it be depression, suicide prevention, anxiety, whatever it might be, what is one of the biggest things that you try to get across to people?
I try to tell them you're not alone, and here's the hotline, which we know from Logic's song, 800-273-8255. That's where I always direct people, because it's national, and then they can point you to local resources. Whether it's someone who's thinking about suicide, or even somebody that's trying to help someone that's struggling, maybe it's anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, that can become a very blended kind of bag. And so I just try to point them to show them, hey, you're not alone, and you can call 24/7 and just begin the process of, what are those resources? Where can you get plugged in? And then on top of that, it's not only about calling, but absolutely they're trained 24/7. They can actually give so much help to people. But on top of that, it's just being open and sharing with the people in your life. I think my brother wasn't, although he did talk about suicide, and we didn't believe him. But I think that just letting people know that you're struggling, or maybe texting some friends like, hey, can you check in on me? You know, just really letting people know where you are and having that level of honesty about having a real conversation. Like American Foundation for Suicide Prevention has something they do, and it's you can have a real convo with me. It's one of the things that they push out because I think just two people talking, I think that gives someone help and relief if they're struggling.
So obviously this was a huge part of taking care of your mental health. But after going through something so devastating like that, what were some other ways that you took care of your mental health?
I think really it was day to day. It really varied. And in the very beginning, it was doing things that I knew would fill me up. So it was spending time with people that we were really good for each other, you know, just like close friends that we could equally pour into each other's lives. Sometimes I would just listen to certain music that I needed. I wouldn't overschedule myself. Just watch a funny movie or a funny show, just the little things. I think not overscheduling is a big one, especially in our modern culture and in the city we live in LA. It's almost like busy is a value in a way that it means you must be important because you're so busy. And I caught myself getting in that line of thinking is that I have to be busy all the time. So I actually do less and I just do quality time, you know, with family, with people that I really care about. And I think that helps a lot.
Yeah. I think that's something that I've been challenged with too, especially. I mean, I've been pretty open and thankfully, you know, it's never been crippling, but anxiety is something that I deal with. And I actually, you know, was just saying that I had a really, like, my anxiety was through the roof on Tuesday. And it's always just, you know, people are like, well, what caused it? I'm like, it just sometimes doesn't have a rhyme or reason, like, so that, you know. And, you know, my little brother, he is clinically depressed and also deals with anxiety. So he kind of gets it on both ends too. And so, you know, self-care is so important. And for me, it's like, for me and my brother, it's like I go to a therapist every Tuesday. He's in college, so he sees his counselor. And I am someone who will always drive the point on, like, get therapy. I will preach that all the time. It's something that I think people are like, well, what's wrong with you? I'm like, it doesn't matter. Something doesn't have to be wrong with you, you know?
Right.
Like, sometimes it's just really great to get to know yourself a lot better and increase your self-awareness and learn how you tick so you can better maintain yourself. And that's something that I preach all the time, and especially with when my brother first came to me and when he was 16 and told me that he was depressed and he had been dealing with suicidal thoughts. That was something that rocked my world. And he was 16, and it was really bad. Like, those were just really dark years. But, like, I, you know, tell him all the time now. I always say, if my brother calls me, I'm always going to answer, because I'm always like, if you're having a poor mental health day, you call me, like, and we'll talk it through. But he has always been so good about, since then, going to therapy and counseling and things like that, and you know, seeing his psychiatrist. And just, I always say, Matt, like, that is great, because you are, you know, you're now in college, but you've been seeing a therapist for a while, and you're that far ahead of you're you know, you're kind of ahead of the curve and as far as self-awareness and knowing yourself. And that's why, like, when you came to me about this was something that is personal to me too. And not in the same way, but it's just, when I saw that was the thing that made me have a heart for mental health awareness. And the people I talk to, whether they're in high school or college or our age, and I sometimes see stigmas with it that can be so harmful. And that's why I thank you again for doing this, because it is so important. I think the more we talk about it and the more we drive that point home of, like, if your arm was broken, you wouldn't just ignore it. Like, that'd be crazy. Like, you have to go do something about it, because you just pretending like it's not there doesn't mean that your arm's going to get better.
Right.
You know?
Right. And getting that help, like, your brother is ahead of the curve, just the fact that he is going and continues to go. I think that's one of the things that I think people fall into a trap where there's still shame or embarrassment attached to getting help, even though you wouldn't say to someone, like you're saying, you know, if you broke your arm, why would you go to the doctor? Like, how weak of you. Like,
Yeah.
no one would ever.
No one.
No, but yet if you need help with your mental health, I think we need what I think why we both feel so passionate is getting that to be just as natural about reaching out for that kind of help, just as you would any other physical problem that you had.
Yeah. So how, like, because this is something that I've noticed when talking to people who are clearly depressed or dealing with anxiety, and I do feel a little bit of that pushback. Sometimes I've been trying to talk to people again who are kind of on the same wavelength of mental health awareness. How do you gently kind of drive that point home of being like, I know you think I'm just saying this, but there's really no shame in that, like getting help. Like, how do you approach those situations?
I try to listen first and just really take in what they have to say. If it's a close friend and they're opening up to me about that, then already we have some level of mutual trust.
Trust, yeah.
Because I probably won't hear that from someone that I'm not already a certain level of closeness with. So when I have a friend like that, I just try to ask them the honest questions.
Yeah.
You know, how often are you having those thoughts? I just try to hear from them about their experience and then check in on them and then ask them the questions that are important, like, does your family know? You know, especially if I don't live near them, who's your support system? Are you seeing a counselor? Are you seeing a doctor? Like, is there medication that needs to be involved to help elevate where you are?
Yeah.
Because I'll tell them I'm not a therapist, I'm not a doctor, but I've had a personal experience, and so I want to, you know, voice the hope that's there and the possibility. So yeah, I just approach it I just try to listen and really hear them out, because I think there's such a power that happens when we share a story and someone just really hears us.
Yeah.
And I think that resonates with them when I'm hearing somebody. And so I just really listen to them and then ask the important questions about more of the long term, like, what is the plan in place to help? Because there's clinical depression, and then there's somebody that might need help in a season of their life, and it might not be their lifetime. It might, but it might not be. We don't know, and that's why we want to involve the professionals for help.
Yeah.
And then to just continue to be reaching out, because I think the thing is that we get really good at wearing a mask, and I think people don't realize that really outgoing personality or something, you don't know if they're wearing a mask. And I think my brother fell into that category. Is no one on the outside would ever think he would ever want to take his life. You just look at the outside. Your life is great. You have a lot of friends. You have a great family. Good-looking kid. Why would you ever kill yourself or even think about it? And so I think it's being super honest with the people around us and actually finding out how is someone really doing, and if they are struggling, checking in on them, but also not being a hero and pretending like we as a friend have all the resources and really pointing them toward those more long range and then checking in on them.
How do you, you kind of went into my next question, because so often I think people think that you will automatically see you'll know depression when you see it, and that is so often not the case. And so I think something that I ask people who again are really well versed when it comes to mental health awareness is like, what are the signs? How can we be better about seeing the signs, especially when the signs are really hard to see? Right. And you already answered really what you do, but like how do you try to be more aware of what the signs are?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things you can look for, and especially when it comes to depression as it links to really signaling like a cry for help for suicide, things such as increased drug and alcohol use, retreating from family and friends, isolating, pulling back from activities they used to enjoy, sleeping too much or too little. There's all these kinds of behaviors, and then there's mood things too, swings in mood. Sometimes a mood lift indicates that a person has made up their mind to take their life, so you have to be careful of that. Sometimes people will say, I thought they were getting better, so it's just something to be mindful of. And all of this is listed on American Foundation for Suicide Prevention as well, because not everyone that's depressed is thinking of suicide. So I understand that those aren't one and the same, but
of course.
Right. So, but many of the warning signs for suicide, are that someone is depressed and losing hope. That's really, if someone says they feel trapped, they're a burden on others, or they're losing hope, because actually the demographic that takes their life most often is middle-aged males, white males. and it's not teens or 20s. It's someone later in life. And so it's just about, just keeping in touch and not, because it is that feeling of they lost hope. It's not how they look on the outside. Yeah. It's not if they have a great family. It's not if they have, kids. It's not about that. It's really about, we don't know what's going on in someone's mind. So being aware of those things.
I think it's something else as we're talking that I really kind of a point I really want to drive home when it comes to awareness, especially with depression, is I've been seeing it a lot online, and it always bothers me when I see those inspirational quotes of like, you choose happiness, or you choose to see, the good in things, and you choose this, and I see it and it fills me with rage, because for so many people it's not a choice. And I think so often we kind of live in this culture of like, oh, you're just being negative. Like, you need to just choose to be positive, and you need to be more positive. And it's like, no, for a lot of people out there, it's really not a choice. How you handle it is a choice, but it's not a switch. And I think that there's so many people, and I think still you have the stigma on depression where people really think it's like a switch, or it's just really like, it's something that they're doing, when sometimes it can just really come down to like a chemical imbalance. Right. And it's not a choice. And so when you talk about what triggered that thought for me was when you talked about that mood lift, because I hadn't heard that. I didn't know that was a thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that there are people who are like, oh, they're good. They got themselves out of it. They're happy. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that might not be the case.
It might not. Yeah. I mean, basically what you're touching on is as if it's something they can snap out of. Yeah. Right. And when it's so much bigger than that.
So much bigger. Right. And, I hear it with anxiety too. It's like, when I'm having a terrible anxiety day, well, just like stop. And I'm like, I'm just like, what do you mean?
Like you're making it worse.
Yeah, you just made it so much worse. I'm trying, but and it is why I am so big on, again, like therapy and right. seeing someone like my brother, and this is something that runs in my family, right? Mm-hmm. Like depression and anxiety is something that runs on both sides of my family, and it's something that I'm happy that there is an open discussion that can happen, because so many of us have gone through it and deal with it. But then, I know that there are so many people out there that don't have those open discussions, or maybe it's just in their communities, it's not something that's talked about.
Yeah, and in a family where there's a history of depression, certainly it's gonna be something you want to be mindful of for the whole family. Mm-hmm. Same thing with suicide. If there's been a suicide in the family, the rate goes up, the risk factor for everyone in that family. Mm-hmm. It's just unfortunately the effect that it has. Mm-hmm. But I think the starting point is open dialogue, so a person doesn't suffer by themselves and then spiral down thinking they're really alone. Yeah. Because that isolating feeling is what just starts the walls close in.
Another thing I have noticed, and I think it's sometimes such a hard balance to find, is when someone is severely depressed. Mm-hmm. And when you do try to help and listen, and sometimes you can see them still, it's not like, oh, you want to talk? Like, oh, no one's asked me, so let me tell you. It's really just like, you may have so many friends in that person's life that are really trying to get in there, and it's sometimes, I think trying to find the balance of being present and available and asking how are you, without making it worse for them, where they feel like the only thing that you want to talk about when they come around is how their mental health is, when they might not want to be thinking about it. That's sometimes for me a hard line to toe.
Yeah, it's hard to know because each person's so different, and their response will be different, and day to day it might be different. Yeah, I think that's why friendship is so powerful. Yeah, is just staying in touch with people, you know, because your friendship is about so much more, and that's one part of it, is the checking in on each other and really keeping contact. But yeah, there's not really like an easy answer, because it will vary so much person to person and day to day, and that's why I try to look at it as a whole picture. Is like. Say in that specific example where you're trying to be supportive to a friend, you do your part, but there's also like acknowledging that there's so much going on if it is actually clinical depression. Where are there doctors involved? You know, what's the full picture?
For sure. I'm so thankful that you took the time out of your busy day to sit down and talk about this with me. And I know, again, this is Mental Health Awareness Month. And for someone who loves to talk about this, when you came to me and were like, Mental Health Awareness Month, I was like, it is? Like, I was just like, I didn't even know.
Right.
But like, again, but this is why we do things like this, so we can kind of get the word out there more. And I'm again, I can't say it enough. I can't tell you how thankful I am that you wrote this book, because it already sounds like you've touched a few lives through it. And I think this is a conversation that is so important to have. And also want to drive the point home, you don't have to have anxiety or depression or anything to go seek a therapist or anything. I just think just maintenance on your mental health is so important.
Yes.
You know, it's really like, so many people are like, well, what's wrong if you're going to therapy? It's like, sometimes it's like, you know, what everyone else goes through, you know, daily work stress, whatever it is. Sometimes it's just really nice to talk to someone and learn how you tick. But with this specifically, with suicide prevention and depression, this is an incredibly heavy topic. And again, I know I said it so many times, but you were so brave. And
thank you.
I'm very thankful that this is something that you poured your heart out into these pages and then let the world read it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Is there anything else you want to tell our listeners, like where they can buy your journal?
Yes, you can get it on Amazon, Journey of the Heart by Katie Williams. Amazon, if you prefer to listen, it's iTunes and Audible, or if you're more of the e-reader, it's on Kindle. You can get it there. And I would say the only thing I would say as a final kind of thought is just, again, kind of keeping tabs on your friends. Just a quick story. I had a friend that knows about my brother, knows the warning signs, and he came to me and said, I'm concerned about my friend. I got a text, and it said, thank you for being such a good friend. And he thought, why are you texting me? We have plans to hang out coming up really soon. Why are you texting me? And he called me and said, I'm concerned. I said, I think you should. And should be concerned. And I got more information. And the long story short is, they got to his friend's house in time, and so did his family, and they basically were able to save his life because they interceded and got him to the hospital and saved his life. So you just never know what someone's going through. So just be on the lookout for those warning signs. If someone says they're going to take their life, or if they start saying their goodbyes and making those final phone calls, it means it's coming soon, and that's what you take seriously. And that's when you call the hotline and get help and find out resources.
So one more time, what was the website for the suicide prevention?
Yes, so you can find all of it on American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, AFSP, or also the hotline is 800-273-8255.
Thank you. And again, this is Journey of the Heart, Katie Williams, and you can get it on Amazon. Thank you so much, Katie.
Thank you, Alex.
I'm going to hug you.
Yes. Naturally.